Imagine being completely cornered. I mean, just
Huh.
absolutely trapped. Your reputation is ruined.
Yeah, and your enemies are setting literal traps for you in the dark.
Right. And even worse, the people you thought were your closest friends are starting to look at you with suspicion.
That is a terrifying thought. Because if you speak up to defend yourself, you know your words will just be twisted.
They will be used against you, yeah.
Yeah.
Your chest is tight, your mind is racing. So, what is your first instinct in that scenario?
Well, I think our natural reflex is to fight back. We want to launch a public relations
Oh,
campaign.
absolutely. We want to draft a scorching defense, post it everywhere, and lash out at the people ruining our lives.
Yeah, that is the human reaction.
But today on Reformed Thinking, we are opening up Charles Spurgeon's The Treasury of David to look at an ancient blueprint for surviving this kind of modern nightmare.
We are doing a custom-tailored analysis of Psalm 141.
Yeah, so you are getting a shortcut to a text that functions as a manual for handling vicious slander. It is a guide for putting a padlock on your own speech and for trusting divine sovereignty when you are surrounded by unseen traps.
And to really grasp this, we have to look at the author, David. He is living in a state of intense suspicion.
He is half afraid to open his mouth, right? Terrified he might say something unadvisedly while trying to clear his name.
Spot on. He is slandered, hunted by the state, and censured by the saints. Yet his response gives a highly practical strategy for your own life today.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the historical reality of David's situation is what makes this text so applicable.
Yeah, we see a man stripped of his usual defenses. His regular avenues of recourse are completely blocked.
Right, he cannot rely on his military genius, his political alliances, or, his popularity with the masses.
Well, he is driven into a corner where his only remaining action is the one action that never fails. And that brings us to the opening verses of the psalm.
The anatomy of an urgent cry. David begins by saying, "Lord, I cry unto thee."
And what stands out here is the exclusivity of this trust. I mean, misbelief will seek 1,000 different ways for delivery from trouble.
Yeah, human nature runs to wealthy friends or clever schemes or just personal cunning.
But faith has only one path, to go to God. David makes God his absolute and only refuge.
It is a painful, feeble prayer. It is worthy only to be called a cry, the kind of raw, animalistic sound someone makes when the pressure just becomes unbearable.
Yet it is ennobled because it is directed to Jehovah. David repeats this phrase, saying, "I have cried unto thee, I still cry to thee, and I always mean to cry to thee."
Right, and the theological reality here aligns with our understanding of human limitation and divine sovereignty.
Yeah, when you are in severe distress, the realization of your own utter helplessness is the very thing that drives you to the Almighty.
You reach a point where you acknowledge that no human intervention can possibly fix the ruin of your circumstances.
Absolutely.
But I want to look closely at a specific pushback that arises in the very next breath David takes. He says, "Make haste unto me."
Yeah, that is a striking phrase.
On the surface, that phrasing sounds demanding. I mean, is it presumptuous for David or for you, the listener, to tell the creator of the universe to hurry up?
It does seem to clash with the idea of patiently waiting on the Lord's timing, doesn't it?
Right. If God is completely sovereign, why would a believer urgently press him to move faster? It almost sounds like a lack of faith.
But looking at the source text, there is a fascinating explanation for this urgency. It describes a concept called holy importunity.
Holy importunity. Let's look into that.
The text acknowledges that God's timing is best, but it also reveals that severe distress allows believers to quicken the movements of mercy through earnest pleading.
Because the reality is that in many earthly scenarios, if help arrives late, it might be too late.
Yeah, and the believer is permitted to pray against such a calamity. Ezekiel Hopkins provides a brilliant analogy for this dynamic.
Oh, I love this analogy.
He says that our prayer and God's mercy are like two buckets in a well.
So while one bucket ascends, the other descends.
Precisely. As the empty bucket of our urgent pleading prayer goes down into the well of God's grace, the full bucket of His mercy is drawn upward to meet our need.
Wow, so the deeper our cry goes down, the more abundant the mercy that rises to meet us.
Yeah, and this visual changes how we view desperate prayer. It is not an act of arrogance to ask God to make haste.
It is an act of total dependence. It is recognizing that without His immediate intervention, we are entirely lost.
Right. The mechanics of a well require the rope to be pulled. The empty bucket has to drop to the bottom to retrieve the water.
That well analogy captures the mechanical reality of earnest supplication beautifully. The desperation of the cry is a very mechanism that draws the mercy upward.
And as David continues this urgent plea, he shifts his imagery from the well of mercy to the altar of worship.
He says, "Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice."
To fully grasp the weight of this, we must examine the historical notes from Hugh Macmillan regarding the tabernacle.
Yeah, let's talk about the ceremonial worship of the Hebrews, because none of the senses were excluded from taking part in the service, right?
Spot on. The sense of smell occupied a highly prominent place. The acceptance of the worship was often indicated by a symbol borrowed from this sense, the Lord smelling a sweet savor.
So incense was not just a pleasant aroma, it was the great symbol of prayer.
Yes, the altar of incense stood in the closest connection with the altar of burnt offerings. Every morning and every evening, a censer full of incense poured forth fragrant clouds.
But here is the most striking historical detail. This incense acted as a great equalizer in worship.
That is such an amazing point. Those who were deaf could not hear the prayers of the priest.
And those who were blind could not see the sacrifices. But the soft, fragrant clouds of smoke reached everyone in the camp.
Right. A person shut out from social worship by their physical affliction could still join in the devotional exercises through the medium of their sense of smell.
The hallowed impressions shut out by one avenue were admitted to the mind and heart by another.
Furthermore, the theological weight of this imagery is massive. The sacred incense could not be lit with any ordinary flame.
Wait, it had to be a specific fire.
Yes, it required live coals taken directly from the altar of burnt offering, the very place where the blood of atonement was shed.
Oh, wow. So this symbolizes that acceptable prayer is kindled by the altar fire of Christ's sacrifice.
And perfumed by his merits. Prayer is not a casual thought thrown into the wind.
It is a carefully prepared, reverently offered, sweet-smelling savor, resting entirely on the foundation of the atoning sacrifice.
Yeah, that transition from the altar fire to the individual believer is stunning.
Because if our prayers are like this holy incense, relying on the blood of the sacrifice, then the vessel offering that prayer must be fiercely protected.
Right. Because prayer is so holy, the mouth that offers it must be guarded from defilement.
David realizes this. He prays, "Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth, keep the door of my lips."
I love the imagery of the lips as a door. Nature has given us the physical ability to open and shut our physical mouths.
Yeah, we can clap our teeth together, we can press our lips tight.
But we lack the moral ability to guard our speech under pressure.
Matthew Henry articulates this well. He says that nature made the lips a door, but grace must keep that door.
Think about your physiological response to being attacked or slandered. Your heart rate rises. Adrenaline floods your system.
The overwhelming desire is to open the door of your lips and let the wind of your anger blow outward.
In times of persecution by ungodly men, or when we are intensely provoked, we are highly liable to speak hastily, or evasively, or with bitterness.
So if we use our mouth to offer holy incense to God, it is a tragedy to let it be defiled with untruth or pride or wrath.
David realizes that with all his own vigilance, he might be surprised into sin. He cannot trust himself.
He needs a guard stationed at the gate. We must recognize our inability to preserve ourselves from the disorders of speech.
Yeah, a few thoughtless words can fan anger and malice into a raging flame. This is why David begs the Lord himself to keep him.
When Jehovah sets the watch, the city is well guarded.
When the Lord becomes the guard of our mouth, the whole individual is well garrisoned.
And the vulnerability of that door is tied to the theological reality of human nature, right?
Absolutely. The heart is deceitful above all things. We are often blind to our own capacity for failure.
When provoked, the flesh wants to defend itself, to retaliate, to justify its actions.
We need God to become the watchman of the city, because if left to our own inclinations, we will decline from the right path.
This inward corruption is precisely why David connects the mouth so closely with the heart in the very next verse.
He prays, "Incline not my heart to any evil thing, to practice wicked works with men that work iniquity."
The way the heart inclines, the life soon tends. Unless the fountain of life is kept pure, the streams of life will soon be polluted.
Yeah, evil things desired bring forth wicked things practiced. And David is acutely aware of the danger of association.
Even good individuals are apt to be swayed by the company they keep.
If you are surrounded by those who make a practice of iniquity, which literally translates to a want of equity, a lack of justice and righteousness, you are in danger of adopting their customs.
Sin is an infectious disease. It is bad when the heart goes the wrong way alone, but it increases to a high degree of ungodliness when the backslider runs the downward path with a whole horde of sinners around them.
Therefore, the prayer is a plea for God to act as a barrier against both the internal corruption of the heart and the external contagion of wicked associates.
We are porous creatures, absorbing the atmosphere of the rooms we choose to sit in.
And that external contagion leads to a fascinating detail in verse 4.
Yes, David does not just pray against doing evil or practicing wicked works. He specifically prays, "Let me not eat of their dainties."
Why focus on the food? Why not just say, keep me from their crimes?
Or, prevent me from participating in their violence. Why is the warning centered on a banquet?
The analysis from our sources provides a brilliant answer here. Sin is presented as sweetmeat.
Wickedness often brings temporal prosperity, and the trap is baited with delicious foods to capture the palate.
The enemies of David were sensual and luxurious. They would gladly have admitted him to share in their banquets if his character had resembled their own.
But he entreats to be preserved from the inducement. The perpetrators of iniquity do not invite you to join them by showing you the ugly consequences of their actions.
No, they bring out their sweet morsels and delicate dishes. They hope to bind you to their service by means of your palate.
If you work with them, you will soon eat with them. If you share their wantonness, you will soon share their wickedness.
Think about how this shows up today. We are rarely tempted by obvious ruin.
Right, we are tempted by a promotion or the corner office or just a really comfortable lifestyle that requires a 5% compromise on our ethics.
That is the dainty. Modern compromises are often dressed up as sophisticated networking events, open bars, and charcuterie boards, rather than blatant evils.
David recognizes that the dainties of the wicked are poison disguised as a feast, and he would rather starve in the wilderness than eat with them.
The bait is always designed to appeal to our natural appetites.
And rejecting those sweet dainties of the wicked means you must be willing to accept a much bitterer dish, the hard truth from the righteous.
David makes a brilliant shift here, stating in verse 5, "Let the righteous smite me, it shall be a kindness. And let him reprove me, it shall be an excellent oil, which shall not break my head."
The contrast is stark. When the ungodly smile upon us, their flattery is cruel. They are feeding us the poisoned dainties.
But when the righteous smite us, their faithfulness is kind. Spurgeon uses a great old term here, a Boanerges, which literally means a son of thunder.
We all have that one friend who is a son of thunder, right? The person who refuses to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah, and that person is just as necessary for our spiritual health as a Barnabas, a son of consolation.
Sometimes godly individuals do not hint at evil, they hammer at it. Grace teaches a believer to take those potions which are wholesome, even if they are not toothsome.
Faithful reproof is a token of love. Fools resent reproof, but wise individuals endeavor to profit by it.
We must be readier to censure ourselves than others, and readier to confess a fault than to expect a confession from those whom we reprove.
It is a sign of a polluted nature when a person, like a serpent, gathers poison and vomits it up at the party who touches them with correction.
David welcomes the sharp blows of a true friend because he knows they're designed to heal, not to destroy. He views the correction as an act of medical intervention.
And here's where the psychology of that medical intervention gets really interesting.
Yeah, David uses the specific analogy of reproof as excellent oil which shall not break my head.
To understand how a harsh critique acts as medicine, we have to look at the historical context of Oriental customs.
In the ancient East, the crown of the head was the place selected for chastisement. Owners of slaves, husbands, or schoolmasters would beat the heads of offenders with their knuckles.
It was a humiliating and painful punishment. Yet, at the same time, medicinal oil was applied to the head to cure severe ailments like fevers or delirium.
There is an old proverb that says, "If my head is to be beaten, let it be done with the fingers that have rings on."
Meaning by someone of rank. But David elevates this. He says, "Let a holy man smite my head." And what of that? It is an excellent oil.
The blow might feel like a physical strike, but its effect is the soothing, curing action of medicinal oil.
But, this places a massive responsibility on the one delivering the rebuke.
It really does. Meddling with someone's faults is like moving a person afflicted with rheumatic gout.
Have you ever known someone with gout? The joints are so inflamed that even the weight of a bed sheet causes excruciating pain.
Right. Moving that person must be done slowly, tenderly, and with evident love. You cannot just thrash around with blunt criticism and claim you're being honest.
Very blunt people do little good to others and get little love to themselves. The nail of reproof must be well oiled in kindness before it is driven home.
If we act like spiritual constables, eager to point out flaws without compassion, we cause immense damage.
But if we deliver the rebuke gently, it insinuates itself and brings genuine healing to the delirium of sin.
Because the method of delivery dictates whether the reproof is received as medicine or rejected as assault.
As the text outlines, it must be done without gall, meaning without bitterness or personal vindictiveness.
And it must be done without public disgrace, aiming to reform the friend privately rather than humiliate them before the world.
And it must be done without flattery, maintaining strict honesty. When rebuke is delivered in this manner, it becomes the excellent oil that rescues the wandering.
It awakens the sleepy and saves the lost from imminent danger.
And once a person has the humility to accept this kind of correction, they are perfectly positioned to offer sweet words to others when the tables turn.
David says in verse 6, "When their judges are overthrown in stony places, they shall hear my words, for they are sweet."
The historical context here is striking. This verse refers back to the interaction between David and Saul.
Saul and his leaders were the ones hunting David, acting as unjust judges.
The text contrasts Saul's barbarity with David's humanity. Saul commanded the horrid massacre of Ahimelech and the priests by the hand of Doeg the Edomite.
An act of sheer savagery. On the other hand, David had the opportunity to destroy Saul in the rocky places, specifically in the damp, dark cave of En-Gedi.
Instead of taking vengeance, David spared Saul's life, only cutting off the skirt of his robe.
When Saul left the caves, David followed and expostulated with him, meaning he reasoned with him earnestly from a distance in the gentlest, most respectful language.
He set his own innocence and the king's unjust behavior in such a clear, mild light that even the hard-hearted Saul wept.
When tyrannical judges are overthrown, the people recognize the justice and equity of a righteous administration.
Words previously ignored or slandered are heard as sweet and pleasant.
The sweetness of that vindication is beautiful, but there is a massive paradox here.
Yeah, a big shift is coming.
If David is accepting this healing oil, refusing the dainties of the wicked, and responding to his enemies with grace, why does the very next verse sound like he is standing in a graveyard?
Right, he goes from this beautiful posture of healing straight into terrifying imagery.
In verse 7, David says, "Our bones are scattered at the grave's mouth, as when one cutteth and cleaveth wood upon the earth."
This sounds like total, unmitigated despair. It paints a picture of a woodchopper's yard where everything is broken, hacked to pieces, and completely doomed.
The cause of God in Israel seemed like a dead thing, a skeleton broken and shoveled out of the grave to return as dust to its dust.
There seemed to be no life, no cohesion, no organization. David himself felt like one of these dried, scattered bones.
It reads like a scene from the travels of James Bruce, the Scottish explorer who encountered a village whose inhabitants had all perished.
He described their wretched bones lying unburied upon the surface of the ground.
A spectacle of horror, especially to a Jewish mindset where lack of burial was a monumental calamity.
If the people of God are chopped up like wood and scattered at the mouth of the grave, where's the hope?
How can this possibly be reconciled with the confident expectation of divine deliverance? It feels like we are staring into an abyss of utter defeat.
It absolutely reads like a scene of absolute devastation until you uncover the linguistic pivot hidden in the original Hebrew.
Okay, let's unpack this linguistic pivot.
The word translated as cleaving or cutting wood actually relates to the act of plowing the earth. The Hebrew word is palash, which means to cleave, slice, or furrow.
Franz Delitzsch provides the crucial analysis here. The figure is not just about chopping wood for the fire, it represents plowing and making furrows in the earth.
To a worm, a plow looks like an instrument of apocalyptic destruction. It tears up the soil, breaks the clods, and ruins the surface.
Yes, the field of the church looks plowed, burrowed, and scarified. It looks like a woodchopper's yard.
But the bones are not just scattered there to rot in the sun. They're like seed sown into the upturned earth in preparation for a glorious resurrection.
God takes what appears to be utter destruction and uses it as the necessary preparation for new life.
They do not lie there in order to continue lying. They are planted so they may sprout up anew.
When believers face extreme division, when their cause seems cut to pieces and hopelessly sundered, they must look beyond the surface of the plowed field.
There lives one who will give a resurrection to his cause and a reunion to his divided people.
He brings up the dead bones from the grave's mouth and makes the dried wood live again.
This transforms a picture of grotesque slaughter into a promise of inevitable harvest. But to see that harvest, You must completely control where you are looking.
That transition from the graveyard to the plowed field changes the entire perspective.
Survival in that plowed field depends entirely on where you fix your gaze.
When surrounded by the threat of death and the scattered bones of your companions, the only survival strategy is determining where you look.
David says in verse 8, "But mine eyes are unto thee, O God, the Lord in thee is my trust. Leave not my soul destitute."
Thomas Watson gives a brilliant piece of advice on this point. He states that to keep the mind fixed in prayer, you must keep the eye fixed.
Much vanity comes in at the eye. When the eyes wander in prayer, the heart wanders.
Trying to keep the heart fixed while letting the eyes gaze abroad is like trying to keep a house safe while leaving all the windows wide open to the street.
David looked upward and kept his eyes fixed there. He regarded duty more than circumstances.
He considered the promise rather than the external providence. He expected relief from God rather than from men.
He did not shut his eyes in indifference or despair, nor did he turn them to the creature in vain confidence.
He gave his eyes to his God and saw nothing to fear, and in doing so, he cries out, "Leave not my soul destitute."
The phrasing introduces the concept of spiritual beggary. The literal translation asks God not to pour out his soul like water from a vessel, but to keep it in the cup of salvation.
To be destitute of money or earthly resources is a hardship, a matter of physical poverty. But to be destitute in soul is far worse.
To be stripped of every hope, left completely bare to nature's poverty, and abandoned to the weight of one's own sins is total destruction. Destitution of God is destitution with a vengeance.
And David knew what it meant to rely solely on the Almighty's provision because the enemies around him were constantly setting traps.
In verses 9 and 10, he prayed to be kept from the snares, the gins, and the nets laid by the workers of iniquity.
These evil workers sought to catch David in his speech or his acts. If they could not catch him in open combat, they would try covert temptation.
Brave individuals do not dread the open battlefield, but they despise secret plots and hidden traps.
To understand the sheer menace of these traps, we rely on J.G. Wood's historical data regarding ancient hunting practices.
Specifically, the hunting of lions in the Middle East. Lions were rarely captured through open face-to-face combat.
Right. A hunter with a spear is no match for a full-grown lion.
Instead, hunters utilized deep pitfalls covered with sticks and earth, or massive circular nets.
The hunters would find the lion's dwelling place in the thicket. They would arrange a curved wall of heavy nets, completely camouflaged.
Then, the psychological terror began. They would send dogs into the thicket. They would hurl stones, shoot arrows, and fling burning torches at the den.
The noise, the fire, and the sudden chaos were designed for one specific purpose: to induce panic.
The mechanics of that trap are absolutely chilling, and the analogy to spiritual attacks is unavoidable.
The hunters do not fight the lion directly. They create sheer chaos. They use fire, noise, and pain to irritate and terrify the animal.
The goal is to induce panic, so the lion stops thinking, it stops relying on its natural instincts, and simply reacts.
The beast rushes blindly away from the noise and straight into the unseen net.
The net envelops the animal, rendering it completely helpless, ready to be bound and taken away.
The enemy of our souls operates with the exact same mechanics. Spiritual attacks often rely on creating chaos, confusion, and panic in our daily lives.
Yeah, the enemy throws fiery darts, hurls accusations, and stirs up circumstances to frighten us.
The intent is to make us abandon our fixed gaze on God, abandon our rational trust in His sovereignty, and rush blindly into a covert snare.
We are pushed toward rash words, hasty decisions, or compromising our integrity just to escape the immediate pressure.
We are driven toward those very dainties of the wicked we discussed earlier because we just want the noise to stop.
This is why David's prayer to keep me is so crucial. It is hard to keep out of snares you cannot see and to escape gins you cannot discover.
Only the omniscient and omnipotent God can preserve us when the hunters are beating the bushes and lighting the torches around our lives.
The chaos is a manufactured illusion designed to drive the prey into the real danger, the net.
But the psalm concludes with a declaration of divine justice that flips the entire scenario.
David prays, "Let the wicked fall into their own nets, whilst that I withal escape."
The very traps designed by the workers of iniquity become their own undoing.
While the wicked are busy digging pits and stringing up snares, the righteous individual, keeping their eyes firmly locked on the Lord, walks right past the danger unharmed.
The wicked are consumed by their own malice. It takes a great deal of grace to refrain from wishing for the immediate destruction of those who hunt us.
Yet, there is a righteous desire to see the innocent delivered and the guilty reap the results of their own deceit.
The ultimate justice is that the hunters become the hunted. caught in the very intricate traps they spent their lives constructing.
While the one who trusted solely in Jehovah is delivered, this reveals a universe governed by strict moral laws, where malice eventually swallows the malicious.
We have traced a remarkable progression through this text today.
We really have.
We began with the urgent, intense cry of a believer whose back is against the wall, offering prayers that rise like carefully prepared incense from the altar of sacrifice.
We recognize the desperate need to station a divine guard at the door of our lips, garrisoning our hearts against the infectious company of the wicked.
And refusing to feast on their poisoned dainties, no matter how appealing the charcuterie board of compromise looks.
We learn to embrace the sharp but healing medicine of righteous rebuke, receiving it as an excellent oil that cures our spiritual delirium, even when it feels like a heavy blow.
We looked at the grim reality of a plowed field strewn with bones and recognized it not as a graveyard of despair, but as the upturned soil preparing for a glorious harvest.
And finally, we saw how fixing our eyes completely on God is the only way to escape the terrifying noise, the fire, and the hidden nets of our enemies, watching as they ultimately fall into the very pits they dug for us.
As we conclude, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over in your own life.
Think about the last time someone offered you a harsh criticism or pointed out a significant flaw in your character.
Did you immediately spit it out like poison, defending yourself and attacking them?
Or did you receive it like an excellent oil, recognizing the loving intent behind the strike?
Furthermore, when you see those very individuals who criticized you or hunted you fall into their own calamities, what is your reaction?
Are you capable of doing what David did, praying for them down in the dungeon of their sorrow, refusing to gloat over their destruction?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Treasury of David on Reformed thinking.
As you go about your week, we encourage you to look closely at the table set before you.
And critically evaluate whose dainties you are eating at the table of your daily life. Keep your eyes fixed upward, and we will see you next time.